Welcome to OpenTechTalks.tv. Today we have a guest speaker, Yam, with us, and he's a founder of Parlant. Welcome, Yam, to the OpenTechTalks.tv.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And thank you so much for joining. And for listeners, who's Yam?
Well, nobody really. I mean, basically nothing fancy. A coder from a young age, avid coder. Also used to do a little bit of graphic design when I was like 14. That's actually what got me into programming.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, always a PC kid, as they say. And kind of as I grew older, obviously getting into the industry, worked at a few places, kind of went up the ranks. I guess one place I worked for that everybody knows is Microsoft. I was like an architect at Azure. But, if you ask me, like I've had even more interesting jobs like before Parland. So working at Apex AI on autonomous vehicle operating systems, hard real-time stuff, low-level stuff. So yeah, maybe I kind of going all over the place, but my interests are like everything coding, but pretty variegated there. If that makes sense.
That's good. So it looks like to me my career. I'm also working on Oracle Cloud, and started career as the developer, DBA, that mindset. So
Yeah.
that's how you learn and keep growing it. All
Yeah.
right. So from last 1.5 year or 2 years, the most recent after your Microsoft and other, what are you trying to do?
Yeah. So, like many people, when GPT-4 came out, honestly, like if I'm being fully honest, I kind of wanted to start my own company at that point. I was very curious about that because as a programmer, I was always having a lot of opinions about how things should be done, and many times not reaching full agreements with people naturally. I tried to kind of keep a low profile for a while, but I realized that for me, it's easier to just kind of take things in my own hand and lead them with creative expression and freedom. And that actually was less energy demanding for me than trying to do something that I thought was boring. And so I decided to try to start my own company. That was good timing because GPT-4 just came out and it was obvious there were so many new opportunities but the technology was really interesting. But the first thing that I noticed, actually at the time, an old friend had called me up and we met for coffee, and he was just starting a new company. He was already kind of like a serial entrepreneur. I used to work with him before, and he was starting a new company trying to turn English into a programming language. So somewhat like what companies like Lovable are doing today, Cursor, I
Right.
guess, to some extent. And I basically spent almost 2 months working with him and trying to turn English into a programming language until I personally kind of gave up. And until today, nobody has really convinced me that it's salvageable. And the reason was because I started feeling like the problem wasn't algorithmic or technological.
Mm-hmm.
There are some things where there's just isn't a correct approach, at least not one that everybody would agree on. And so then the question was preferences, like how do you want certain things done? And as programmers, we're used to making a bunch of decisions on all different kinds of levels. Uh, especially like if you've kind of gotten to the point where you've done system architecture, then you're used to making decisions on a very kind of small scale level. So as Fred Brooks once put it, the demand for perfection is what makes programming so hard because you need to worry about like the commas and the semicolons and all that, all the way up over the years to system architecture. And it turns out like there's so many, just subjective decisions there because,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of software is how do you even want to manage complexity and cognitive load? And so it's kind of started dawning on me that the problem, like I said, is not technological, but somebody has to make all these decisions. And if you let somebody else make those decisions for you, well, it turns out pieces of the puzzle cannot connect to something coherent that you had in mind if you didn't kind of go into all of those small decisions and make sure that it's going to add up to a whole that, by the way, a whole that you weren't even able to articulate properly ahead of time. You just kind of had a spark, right? And that's where I kind of gave up on the idea of trying to turn English into a programming language. And I started kind of appreciating more why programming languages have the syntax that they do have, because it turns out when you're starting to manage a lot of complexity, it actually really, really helps to have clear rules and not have anything be vague. But coming from a place where like I said, I was working on hard real-time operating systems for autonomous vehicles, C++, real-time operating system. That's like almost as much control as you can get in the software world. This is like software that would run on Boeing airplanes and things like that. And I was used to having control over the machine on the level of like microseconds. Not only
Mm-hmm.
this is exactly what needs to be done, but it needs to happen within 10 microseconds or something like that. And then getting introduced to Gen AI. So that's a very, that's like a cliff separating the two. Absolutely no control. Definitely took a change of mindset on my part,
Right.
but I still felt like if you cannot assume any control with any kind of like sufficient certainty, it's
Mm-hmm.
very hard to build stuff. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because you're making one assumption and then you want to make a bunch of other assumptions to kind of build a whole. But then it turns out that you cannot rely on any of your foundational assumptions. So everything breaks all the time and the failure compounds. So if you got a 90% chance of chance of success here, and on top of that, there's another 90%. So you kind of start exponentially losing certainty. So at the end, nothing works, and that's kind of what got me. It started getting me fascinated about how can we introduce more control into Gen AI systems, and that was kind of like the starting point of it all.
Okay. Now you brought a very good, I think, preamble that okay, how you started it, but definitely the question must be coming in your mind that okay, if you want to take this idea into a production ready or a market fit ready product. So what you did, how you validated, yes, your thought process is fine. Now I need to go and then build something.
Yeah. Um, So, I mean, the first thing I did was at some point, like I called up an old friend of mine
Mm-hmm.
and asked him if he wanted to start a company together. And for some reason, he decided that he did. And, we're still not, we're still happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, once we started working together, we understood that we started doing the usual stuff that a new founder does. You start talking to VCs and all that, and you start understanding that you have no idea how this world works, and that there's such a thing as like the market needs to want a product, and you can't just build something cool. But we were kind of set on trying to, like I said, like bring more control into Gen AI, and so we asked ourselves who might be interested. We actually reached out on LinkedIn
Mm-hmm.
to thousands of people,
Mm-hmm.
and if you're watching, you ever got a message from us, sorry if we spammed you. We were just trying to find something to hang on to.
Mm-hmm.
But we started getting a lot of answers from people who had been building conversational AI agents before the time of LLMs, but still using transformers.
Mm-hmm.
And mostly like not generative, but they would use transformers to understand what the user said at each point, and they would kind of design these kind of like flowcharts
Mm-hmm.
of like the agent says this, and then the user would probably say either this, or that. And if he says this, you continue down this path, etc. And it turns out that they were all unexcited about LLMs
Mm-hmm.
and the promise of having something way more conversational at, you know, less effort of like less development effort. And also they were kind of afraid of losing their jobs
Mm-hmm.
because, the question was all those people building these agents that, it was such painstaking, meticulous work, and very, very complex stuff. Now with LLMs, it seemed like just like a junior developer could replace an entire department worth millions of dollars annually. Scary stuff, understandably. But we were kind of coming in and saying, well, we don't believe that. I mean, we truly don't. It's not that we want to kind of necessarily like save anyone, but we
Mm-hmm.
really think there's things are being way too overhyped. I mean, these days, I think most people will recognize that. At
Right.
that, we were sustaining a very unpopular opinion,
Mm-hmm.
but we felt that things were really overhyped. And like I said, I already knew that to so many things when it comes to automation, especially when you're user facing, it's not a matter of like what is the absolute right answer. Because
Mm-hmm.
even if you have two people in an organization and one of them has the right answer, the other one doesn't, they're still going to
Mm-hmm.
disagree with each other, and only one of them will have what they want to be done ultimately. So subjectivity is important. And so we basically started talking to, like I said, hundreds of people through LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
and got a lot of insights into how and why people are trying to use LLMs. And,
Mm-hmm.
and we started kind of falling in love a little bit with the conversational field, conversation design. How do you create an agent that is actually engaging? Can't
Hmm.
just like, if you tell it, I'll give you an example. So most engineers, they're trying to build conversational agents. And let's say you're building one for a bank.
Right.
So you have this functionality where a user can replace their credit card.
Hmm.
And then most engineers will think, okay, so if a user comes in and says, I need to replace my credit card, I need to make the LLM recognize that intent, run the right tool, and move on. Say, got
Hmm.
it, I replaced your credit card. But it turns out that real users don't behave like that at all. They might come
Hmm.
in and say, I have a problem. My dog chewed my card. This is something
Hmm.
that was shared with me recently.
True.
And so, how do you go about designing the proper user interface there, the proper user
Hmm.
experience?
Hmm.
It's subjective. There are
Right.
many trade-offs that you could take depending on your
Hmm.
preferences or your compliance needs or who knows what. And so any decision that you make, any insight that you come to as to like this is how I think this conversation should unfold, you need it was obvious that you needed some way to get the LLM to actually do as you expect and not just whatever it wants.
Is it just focusing on conversational agents and interfaces?
Well, we are the
Or is it wider objective is behind from a commercially viable product? Because I've seen it that you guys also release as an open source. So what is
yeah.
the vision?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is yes, we are focused entirely on the conversational aspect. In other words, like the customer or user facing aspect of
Okay.
agents. It's a dedicated framework to get that thing really, really well. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a world of complexity. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of unbelievable how complex it ends up being. And most of it is because the complexities of just semantics and conversation. But I will say that I think at this point, most of the industry would have realized that so like the old LLM app frameworks is uh, is way too generic.
Mm-hmm.
It's like here's a computer. What kind of computer? What's installed on it? What does it do? How easily can you do it
Mm-hmm.
with it?
Mm-hmm.
So like a generic LLM app framework is I think something that's getting more and more unpopular. And I kind of think with good reason, just my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I personally believe that frameworks, even open source frameworks, will need to start kind of focusing on what end to end use case they're really solving versus like how can they make it seem a little bit easier for newbies to get
Mm-hmm.
something going so that instead of taking 2 weeks to complete the learning curve of how to work with LLMs, a lot of frameworks were kind of going out there to make the learning curve compressed into 1 week instead of 2 weeks. And that's more or less like where their value ended. So I think we need kind of more focused, dedicated frameworks for proper use cases these days.
Okay. And at the end, what customer gets? And is it a commercial product to use that they will use to build their conversational interfaces and everything?
We are building some commercial stuff on top of Parlant, but it's very important to us that the core engine is
Mm-hmm.
extremely powerful, featureful,
Mm-hmm.
comprehensive, and open source. So
Mm-hmm.
being an engineer from, and a software developer from a very young age myself,
Mm-hmm.
having engaged with open source since I was like 14, um, I'm a little bit biased as to, I have like standards of what proper open source is. I don't like the game of like the wolf in sheep's clothing where
Mm-hmm.
you kind of say, here I have my little open source project for you. And as soon as you want to get real value from it, you got to pay. So we didn't want to take that approach. And it was
Okay.
all right because it was our company.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to provide a very featureful engine, and we knew that we already knew we were gonna offer a bunch of useful stuff on top of it that we could commercialize based on our market research. What you get when you install Parlant is a fully featured engine. You can deploy yourself to production.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really need to pay anyone for that, aside from like virtual machines and things like that.
And what technology you guys use? If it's not proprietary or some like you don't want to share,
Oh, no, I
it's
mean, it's
okay.
all out in the open. So, you mean like in terms of our stack, the
Yeah.
library we chose? So Parlant is a client server type of thing
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
there's basically a conversational server, conversational AI server, which is Parlant.
Mm-hmm.
You interact with it to, for example, create a new session with an agent. Parlant kind of takes care of all the interaction events, such as obviously message exchange, as well as indicators such as the agent is thinking, typing.
Mm-hmm.
We send like preamble messages to keep the user
Mm-hmm.
engaged, a bunch of stuff like that.
Okay.
That's like the client server interaction. And we built the server with fast APIs so that, again, like
Okay.
thinking from scratch, we want something that's going to be good for production, that you wouldn't need a lot of resources to run it. You could probably scale out to like hundreds of thousands of users with a single pod.
And what is the value proposition or a unique thing compared to, because there is a huge market of these chatbots, and then now those same chatbot interfaces are converting themselves to becoming an AI agents. And so if you compare that market segment, and then you're just new entrants to the market, how you compare it, or maybe give a value that no, this is the product which we treat as a futuristic point of view. Okay. Right. What is your
Right. Like prompts are pretty easy, right? So, but there is a challenge that everybody is going to run into at some point if they're building something complex enough. And when you're building something customer facing, especially if it's a commercial project with lots of users, it will get complex.
Mhm.
So here's the problem: to get an LLM, if you come in and you say, "All right, I have my business needs and requirements. I
Right.
have protocols that I need to uphold in a conversation. This is what the agent should be able to do with customers." You're probably going to end up with, at the very least, a few dozen instructions of how to approach different situations.
Mhm.
If you give an LLM a few dozen instructions in a system prompt, forget about
Mhm.
it. Forget about consistency.
Mhm.
In our test, after about 5 instructions, you're going to
Mhm.
lose consistency. So it's kind of like talking to a wall.
Mhm.
If you like talking to a wall and
Mhm.
you don't really care about it, you're happy with your prompt, the
Mhm.
outcome is more or
Mhm.
less fine,
Right.
then sure. But then there are projects where you can't really have that,
Mm.
where you actually need the agent to do what you want it to do, even if you specify dozens or hundreds of instructions for different use
Mm.
cases. And now, how do you get it to manage that and to do that coherently in a conversation where a user can talk about more than one thing at a time?
Mhm.
Conversation can switch between topics. Can user's inquiry can reference, like I said, like two or more topics at the same time in subtle ways. So that becomes a real challenging engineer problem or context engineering problem. And I would say that if there's one thing that Parlant really, really helps you with without any effort on your part, is it just
Mhm.
solves that for you. So essentially, if you want to add your instructions into a Parlant agent, you just add them one by one, and then the engine automatically takes care of kind of fetching the right instructions at the right time before each response, so that you're always responding in a way that's aligned to your expectations and to your instructions, right? Not talking to the wall anymore. So if that's important for you, I would say like that's the number one thing that you're going to get from Parland. There are other things,
Okay.
but that's the number one value proposition.
Okay. So maybe this leads me to two questions. No, definitely, you rightly said. And then one is you not only structure, only conversational, then you need to go to the deck to get the structured data from databases, other applications, and all that. And it create more and more challenges into how to respond to that one. And then you use a word control. And that may be with the safety and AI safety and all that. So we put together control towards into an AI safety, or maybe during the conversation, or PIA information should not go, and all those into the chatbots. So how this is all being managed together?
The pieces fit together quite neatly at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day.
Mm-hmm.
You did touch upon a number of important issues. Those are, like I said, some of them Parlant solves out of the box, some of them are out of the scope of Parlant. So we try hard to, and we are engineers at the end of the day. We kind of came into it saying, what's the one of the first principles you learn as a software developer? Separation of concerns. There's
Mm-hmm.
business logic, there's presentation logic, or
Mm-hmm.
there's the presentation layer. Well, I think where a lot of AI projects are getting it wrong today, not getting the results they want, is they make like the classic error in software engineering of tight coupling these two things. And it's hard to separately optimize and get one thing to work right, right? So what Parlant does, it's essentially, like I said, like the user interface of conversational agents. It helps you get the conversation under control, much like React or something like React would allow you to get a graphical user interface under control
Mm.
and do what you want with your users. When it comes to guardrails, that's part of the conversational interface. So Parlant does support that in a built-in way, and it also integrates with moderation services such as OpenAI's or Lakaras.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to, for example, fetching the right documents from a database, indexing
Mm-hmm.
your knowledge base and all that, we're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, the world of managing the conversation properly is so complex, and this world is so complex.
Is another one.
Exactly. Like there's infrastructure for this, and then there's infrastructure for that. You should have multiple options for each. And so we allow you to integrate into whatever backend mechanism you've built to kind of index your knowledge base and fetch the right documents based on a conversational context. The integration is very easy, but we don't actually try to do that for you because the project has enough on its hands just getting the conversation to go as you want.
Okay. So maybe for listeners, if someone is listening and then they just want to start maybe project in their organization on agentic AI, and any recipe which you learned over the years to develop your solution, anything, any key learnings which we can share, you can share with audience.
If they're just getting started with LLMs,
Just getting started, or
I would
maybe they already started it or something which we can pass them some key areas which can benefit them.
I would start with a kind of like a paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said before, so GenAI offers very little certainty. And if you
Right?
haven't dealt with it before, you should really kind of pause and think about that. You're going to be building something with very little guarantees. So if you're just kind of try to wing it, it's the classic problem with everybody gets a demo running in a few days. 0.9, literally 99.9% of people never make it to production. So heed other people's experience in the field for the last couple of years, and try to understand, like I said, you're dealing with something very uncertain. So you need a way to think about it. You need a way to manage that uncertainty. And the first thing I would do is, and others have said it too, start with requirements and understand that if your requirements are the agent needs to always say the right thing and do it with like super low latency and it
Mm-hmm.
should be cheap, forget about it. You need to talk to somebody and explain to them that's not going to happen at this point. So either they can wait 5 years or so, who knows,
Mm-hmm.
or they can start building something and trying to wrap their head around what's happening with this type of new technology. Yeah, that's the first thing is trying to get the expectations sorted out. Because I'm hearing a lot of people saying, yeah, we need to build an agent, an LLM agent. It needs to be able to deal with 100 different things, needs to be 100% accurate, and it needs to respond within 1 second. I mean, pause right there. Talk to somebody. Talk to somebody who's been doing it for a while.
Because we're being hyped from the demo.
Yeah, but I mean, we've seen. It's time to sober up. Like all of us have seen so many Gen AI demos in the past
Yeah.
years. Even like people's grandparents are already know that they can't trust Gen AI demos. So let alone like all of us engineers should kind of come to terms with that. It's hard. It's hard dealing with uncertainty with programming and people telling you everything needs to be perfect. It doesn't add up.
One uncertainty within the LLMs and agenting, and then another key problem is the organization's existing IT ecosystem, tools, applications, workflows, which are being used from last so many years. And now we're trying to just find something and fit it with that. That's where we are. There is like interjection. I want to do something on agentic AI, but how to do it with the existing, and then I want 100% correct, like it's an old project which I just do it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I recently published a blog post that what I call the Gentic API design. So, for the past 20 years or so, we've all been taught how to design, or I mean, some of us have studied how to design proper APIs, let's say REST APIs or
Right.
things of that nature. The game has changed. The same
Change.
rules do not apply. Don't repeat yourself, deduplication, all those things. You can kind of throw them out the window when it comes to working with LLM agents. So many different rules. Like I said, paradigm shifts that need to happen. And I would say like that's the first place to start before you talk about infrastructure or Should we build it? Should we use something from a vendor? Should we use something open source? You should first kind of try to understand how this world works. And the best thing to do that is talk to somebody who's done it.
Right. Now, as another key area which you are working primarily with the customer experience or a domain where public interfaces are there, either it's public sector or whoever. So it's basically external channels. So based on your experience, any suggestions for customers who want to adopt LLMs or maybe agents in the customer experience field? What are some of the key things that they can keep in mind?
Here's a critical one that took me a while to figure out.
Hmm.
So, I mean, everybody also at this point has heard about this thing called hallucinations,
Right.
where the LLM makes some mistake, unintentional mistake. And everybody's trying to talk about the frequency of these hallucinations. So GPT-4o hallucinates like 10% of the time, GPT-4o1 hallucinates 7% of the time, all these kind of benchmarks, right?
Right.
But here's the thing. What you really, really need to worry about is not the frequency of mistakes. What you really need to worry about is the potential magnitude of any single mistake. So if your agent gets it wrong 100% of the time, but the implications are non-consequential, work on it, improve it, move forward. But if it's getting your company into trouble, getting you into trouble, you're risking your job, risking your position, you're risking your customers, deceiving your customers, stuff like that. Now, if you're serving 2 million conversations per month, let's say, which some companies are, we're in touch with some, and you're making one mistake out of a million. No LLM today is making one mistake out of a million. It's like
Mhm.
two mistakes out of 10. But if you're making one mistake out of a million, you're getting potentially two crucial mistakes or getting your company on the news per month. So the much bigger thing to worry about is the potential magnitude and boundaries of a mistake versus the frequency. Frequency, you can continuously improve on that. But as long as you know that it's not going to get you into deep trouble, and that's again one of those things where you have to really think about how you approach agentic design.
Okay. So maybe before we conclude, last couple of questions. As an engineer, and if you go back 2 years back, and when you started working on yourself, and I'm just relating this question, if someone listener, maybe today is their first day. So what could be, or what are some of the suggestions from your side? What journey they can follow to learn the LLMs, interactions, talking, agentic AI? How a programmer, a coder can follow this journey based on your experience as you did it yourself?
So we're talking about somebody who does know how to
Yeah,
program.
yeah. No,
Experience,
no. We are talking about who's a traditional programmer coder, and now they need to convert them into themselves into Gen AI, LLMs, agentic AI.
I mean, here's the problem. I would have said a couple years ago, read a book on the topic or read some good blog posts, study some research articles. Everything has been so marketed up. It's really, really hard to tell marketing mumbo jumbo from real stuff, even unfortunately, even in academia, or at least like research papers and stuff like that. It's hard. At this point, I think with AI and everything, you're stuck talking to a person who has done it. I think if you really care about your time, you really care about learning it the right way, there are there are nice groups, by the way. There are some groups on WhatsApp, Discord, communities of people who have done it for a while on a deep
Mm-hmm.
level. If you can
Mm-hmm.
get into one of those, say, hey, I'm new, I have a
Mm-hmm.
question,
Mm-hmm.
kind of build yourself up the ranks of these communities. Some communities won't accept you immediately if you're a newbie. Many will. Talk to people. Talk to people who have done it. Disregard the hype. Don't be the kind don't be the kind of guy who goes and says, "Hey, did you read about the new benchmark? It turns out this new open source model killed GPT-4o." Okay. Talk to the people who are really working with this stuff.
Yeah, I just got today question this Quinn coder, and I said, okay, doesn't matter, man. Let's go work something to build it.
Yeah.
Talk about, but that's true. That's also another way of treating those benchmarks. All
Yeah.
right.
Be outcome oriented, results oriented, not hype oriented. There's so many lies out there today,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Thank you so much for joining Open Tech Talks. So, if someone want to reach out to you, what are the best medium for them to maybe send you a message or say thank you or hi?
Happy if you add me on LinkedIn. There's also Parlant, which is our project, open source projects website. There you can find a link to our Discord channel, so you can talk not just to me but to our team. We're a team of 10 people, researchers and things of that nature. There's also a contact form if you want to actually meet us. If you have something interesting you want to discuss, we're happy to meet and advise.
Thank you so much, Yam, for joining and sharing your practical experience and hands-on experience with the community.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much.